And so instead of talking to a person, you feel like you're just speaking to a computer or you're just talking to yourself, right? And your answer gets recorded and it gets sent to this, I guess, machine learning algorithm where they will evaluate your answer based on supposedly over 15,000 different variables. Hey, what's up, guys? If you like the content today, I want you to go and click the subscribe button so that we can make sure that you get all of our future content every single week, because I'm putting out more and more content like this multiple times a week to help you get the investment banking job that you want. Okay, so today what I want to talk about is the Hirevue process. Okay, and for those of you that don't know what a Hirevue is, it's essentially the video interviews that have become more and more popular now. It's being used by more and more of the top banks, especially the bulge bracket banks, even the elite boutique banks and some middle market banks. But a lot of these banks are starting to use a Hirevue as the first step in their interview process. Okay, what that means is previously, as of like maybe 5+ years ago, the first round interview typically is with an actual banker or with someone from HR, or it could be a phone interview, right? But nowadays, what the banks are doing is they're actually having you do the first round just on the computer. You're going to get asked some questions and you're going to record your answers into the computer, and then it's going to get submitted. And so instead of talking to a person, you feel like you're just speaking to a computer or you're just talking to yourself, right? And your answer gets recorded and it gets sent to this, I guess, machine learning algorithm where they will evaluate your answer based on supposedly over 15,000 different variables. So it's as detailed as, your body language, or whether you're sitting up or you're slouching, or, the way your eye contact is. Are you looking up or to the side or down? The inflection in your voice. And so it's not even just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And quite frankly, with these artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithm type stuff, it's a black box, right? Like nobody knows what it's actually looking for, okay? But supposedly they're comparing your recording to recordings of previous candidates, or maybe people that have already been hired by the firm, perhaps even people that have not only been hired by the firm but have done very, very well in the job. They want to find more and more people who are similar to those really, really good candidates that they've hired previously, right? So this really gives a lot of candidates a lot of anxiety, because it's kind of weird when you're not talking to a human. You're just speaking to yourself and you have no idea how you're being graded or what are you being judged by, right? And so a lot of people, they get stuck on this Hirevue stage where, by the way, they give Hirevues very liberally. So that's the other thing while I'm on this topic, is like, if you get a Hirevue from the bank, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like when I speak to my clients, we don't even count the Hirevue as like getting the interview. We don't really view us as having gotten the interview unless you move past the Hirevue and you actually get to speak to a human being. Okay, so that's the first thing that you gotta know. They give these very liberally, but a lot of people, they get to the Hirevue stage and they go all excited, and then they don't actually move on to the next round, and it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And because you're not even talking to a human being, you don't have a read on why they're not picking you or what you're doing wrong, and that can be frustrating, right? And so today I want to kind of just walk you guys through just 3 tips on how to do well in these Hirevues. But before we even get there, why are these firms using these Hirevues? Well, theoretically, it's allowing the banks to quote unquote democratize the recruiting process, right? And theoretically, this is supposed to benefit you more if you go to, say, a non-target school, because historically, the banks, they have a limited amount of human resources, and the bankers are busy. They'll send the bankers on campus to go and recruit, but they can't send the bankers to every single school, right? So the bankers historically have typically only gone to the top schools, like an Ivy League school or some of the top public schools. That's where this concept of target school and non-target school came from, right? Because if you go to a target school, it's a lot easier for you to get into investment banking, because the banks are proactively trying to find you, and they're proactively trying to recruit from your campus. Whereas if you're not from a target school, they don't go to your school, so they have no idea who you are, right? And so doing the Hirevue and automating this process using a machine learning algorithm allows the banks to again, like I said, give these to pretty much almost everyone. Like in my experience, what I've seen is unless you have some humongous red flag, like your GPA is horrible and just doesn't make the cutoff, or something like that, you will probably most likely get a Hirevue. Okay, and so supposedly kind of evens the playing field a little bit. Now, the nice thing about the Hirevues is that there's like a set list of questions, probably about between supposedly 100 to 150 questions that these banks are choosing from, and they're cycling through. Like it's not the same questions every year, but within each year, it's the same questions that everyone's getting. That's how they can kind of like benchmark you against the rest of the competition, right? So most of these questions also, by the way, are typically behavioral questions, okay, or situational questions. Right? I say most of them because there can always be exceptions, and also sometimes these questions will have what's called sub-questions, or like follow-up questions, right? And so kind of requires you to think on your feet a little bit. Now, typically, you're going to have to answer anywhere from 5 to 7 Hirevue questions, okay? And so if you go through the entire thing, now you should be done in no more than 30 minutes, just like how a first-round interview used to be. Even if you were to interview with the actual banker, it's probably around 5 to 7 questions in a 30-minute interview as well, right? So it kind of simulates that. And depending on the bank, different banks will do it slightly differently, okay? Usually you're going to get 30 seconds of prep time for each question that you have to answer. So they'll put the question up on the screen, and they'll give you 30 seconds to organize your thoughts and think about how you want to answer this question, right? And after the 30 seconds is up, you'll usually have about 2 minutes or sometimes 3 minutes to respond. Like I believe Goldman Sachs is 2 minutes, and then JP Morgan is 3 minutes, or maybe it's the other way around, right? But like different banks do it differently, but usually it's around 2 to 3 minutes, which again, by the way, it's not a coincidence. For most of your behavioral answers, it should be no more than 2 to 3 minutes long in general, right? If you're going beyond that, you're probably rambling and you're going into too much detail, right? So you have about 2 to 3 minutes to deliver your answer. And then it used to be that some banks, and this might still be the case, I'm not sure, but it used to be that some banks will give you opportunities to redo. Like if you don't like your first take, you can do a second take, right? You can do a third take, and so on and so forth. But I think more and more now what we're seeing is these banks don't give you second chances. So after your 30 seconds of preparation, you have one take to get this right? So you better get it right? And so anyway, that's like a quick high level overview of like what a Hirevue is. And then so let's talk about, more importantly, how do you pass the Hirevue, right? And so there's 3 tips that I have for you, and I'm going to make this quick, okay? The first thing is you want to find out what the questions are beforehand, because like I said, every single year, the questions are, year to year, the questions are different, but within a single year, within the same recruiting cycle, the questions are the same for everybody, right? And so if you can find out what the questions are from other people first, then it's a lot easier, because it's kind of like knowing the questions that are going to be on the test before you take the test, right? And so that's the first thing. If you can't find out, then just know that there are typically 3 types of questions to prepare for, right? There's like the standard guaranteed behavioral questions like, why do you want to do banking, or tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume, or like, why are you interested in our firm? Those are like what we lump into the guaranteed questions category. Then the second type is like more like situational questions. So like, tell me about a time when you did XYZ. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated leadership. Tell me about a time when you had to overcome a challenge. Tell me about a time when you had to work with someone who was a difficult individual. Whatever it may be, right? So you got to have these examples prepared. And then the last type of questions that we've seen is like kind of like market related questions. So like having an opinion about something that's going on in the industry, a specific M&A or IPO deal that's happened, or maybe being able to talk about what's going on in the economy or the stock market, or pitching a stock even. So those are probably like the 3 main type of questions to just at a high level be prepared to answer if you don't know what the exact questions are going to be. The second tip is to make sure your setup is fail-proof. What does this mean? Make sure you're in the right environment. Make sure the background in your room looks good, looks clean, right? Like you're going to be on screen. You're going to be getting interviewed. Don't have like inappropriate posters up on your wall. Don't have all your clothes all messy in the background on the floor. Didn't make your bed. Whatever it may be. Like usually what I like to do is just like sit in front of a plain white background, like a wall, right? With no distractions behind you. Okay. Make sure that your microphone's working. Make sure your computer's functioning. Make sure your speaker's working. You probably want to test all these things out before you actually jump on there, because we have heard stories of people that ran into technical difficulties and then they couldn't retake it. There's no redos. Then they reach out to HR and try to explain, but it's like at that point, your chances are probably close to zero, right? And so that's the second thing. You don't want to mess up for silly reasons like that. And then the last thing is time management, right? So again, you have 30 seconds to organize your thoughts. So you have to think quickly on your feet, right? You have to, hopefully what you would do is you have certain stories or examples prepared already beforehand. And then the 30 seconds, that what you're doing is you're just kind of outlining the story, like identifying the story that you want to use out of the 3 or 5 stories that you prepared. And then you're outlining kind of your bullet points on what you want to hit on. And then like sometimes you might have to tweak certain things from the example that you're choosing, because the question they ask is maybe a variation of what you were expecting or is slightly different. But that's not too difficult to do, right? The other thing about time management is like making sure that you're not going over the 2 or 3 minutes, right? Because if you go over and you run out of time, then your answer is incomplete. But also at the same time, don't feel pressured to use up the entire 2 to 3 minute allotment, because if you're done with the answer and there's still 30 seconds left or whatever, that's fine. Some people feel like, oh, they have to keep going, they have to use up all the time, and then they start rambling. It's quality over quantity. Okay, so those are basically like the 3 like quick high level tips I would give you. And so like just to show you, like typically what we do with our clients is like our clients will actually share this intel with each other, right? So what I'm showing you here is like our Facebook group. So our clients will, like, this is an example of a client. He came in and showed, he said, hey, I just had my Hirevue for Goldman, and here are the questions that I got, right? And he listed out the 7 or 8 questions. And Goldman also asked like, division specific questions depending on which divisions you apply to, right? So there's one for investment banking, there's one for investment management, and then I forgot what GIR stands for, right? And then like here's another example, right? We had another client come in and say, hey, in case anyone hasn't completed JP Morgan Hirevue yet, here are the 5 questions I was asked so that y'all can get a leg up. And he listed out the exact 5 questions. And then other clients down here, they started asking follow-up questions like, hey, how long were you given to answer each question? Like blah, 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 blah. Like whatever follow-ups you had. And then this other client said, hey, these 2 questions that I got were slightly different than the ones above. So our clients will constantly share this information with each other and just help each other out. Like we just have a very collaborative community. It's not this cutthroat thing. People are always helping each other out. Everyone's winning together because our success rate is so high anyway. We have an over 90% success rate in most of our clients are getting these jobs. So they're not worried. There's no scarcity, right? They're not like, oh, if you get this job, I'm not going to get this job. So it's important to find yourself an environment like this or a community like this where you guys can share this type of intel with each other and help each other out and support each other, right? And then here's one last example of like, our clients sharing the Bank of America Hirevue questions. And so if you can do that, again, this is probably half the battle, right? And then like what our clients will do is they'll go and they'll write out their answers to every single one of these Hirevue questions. Then they'll actually send it to us and have us vetted for them. And then they'll go and practice and rehearse it and make sure it stays within the time limits. And then by the time they get on the Hirevue, they already know what's coming. And they already know exactly how they want to deliver their answer. Versus the people that they're competing with, they're getting on the Hirevue in the dark. They don't know what to expect. They're seeing the question for the first time. They have 30 seconds to actually prepare for it. And then they have to kind of impromptu their answer on the spot. That is so much harder to do, right? Like, who do you think is going to be more likely to pass the Hirevue and move to the second round? Which, by the way, it's a big deal because if you can pass the Hirevue, nowadays, the second round is typically the super day, which means then you're only one step away from getting the offer. If you pass the super day, then you have the offer in hand, right? So the Hirevue is absolutely critical. It's so important, and it can be a lot easier than probably how you were planning on doing it, right? So hopefully this helps you guys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and let us know. We'll be happy to help you out, all right? Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for more customized advice that's tailored for your specific situation, then I invite you to book a free strategy session with our team at the link below. We'll talk to you soon.